Rosa had always been a woman of quiet strength, though life had tested her resilience in ways she could never have imagined. She had married young to a man named Marco, who was her love and her rock. Together, they had dreamed of a bright future, one where they would raise a family and build a life filled with love and happiness. But life, as it often does, had other plans. Just a few years into their marriage, Marco was diagnosed with a rare illness that slowly but surely sapped the life out of him. Rosa stood by his side through it all, caring for him with a devotion that knew no bounds. When he passed away, Rosa was left not only with a broken heart, but with the daunting responsibility of raising their son, Daniel, alone. The loss of Marco was a blow that Rosa had never fully recovered from, but she knew she had to be strong for Daniel. Her son was the only piece of Marco she had left, and she vowed to give him the best life she could, no matter the cost. But with no family to turn to and little in the way of savings, Rosa was forced to find work wherever she could. She had always been good with her hands, and after some thought, she decided to start making traditional sweets, treats that reminded her of her childhood in Mexico. Every morning before the sun rose, Rosa would get up and begin preparing her sweets. Her small kitchen became a factory of sorts, with pots boiling and the sweet smell of caramel and sugar filling the air. Once the sweets were ready, she would package them with care and set off to sell them on the streets of Atlanta. The work was grueling and the pay was meager, but it was all Rosa had. She would walk for miles each day carrying her basket of sweets, hoping to make enough money to put food on the table and pay for Daniel's school fees. There were days when she sold out quickly, and other days when she returned home with most of her basket still full. But no matter how hard the day had been, Rosa always greeted Daniel with a smile when he came home from school. Daniel was the light of her life. Even from a young age, he had shown a remarkable intelligence and a thirst for knowledge. Rosa had always encouraged his studies, knowing that education was the key to a better future. She wanted more for Daniel than the life she had, a life of struggle and hardship. She had scrimped and saved to send him to the best school she could find, an elite private school that was worlds apart from the neighborhood they lived in. The school was filled with children from wealthy families, the sons and daughters of businessmen, lawyers, and doctors. Rosa knew that Daniel would face challenges there, but she believed in him. She believed that if he worked hard, he could succeed, despite their modest means. Daniel's school life, however, was far from easy. From the moment he stepped through the gates of the prestigious academy, he felt out of place. The other students wore designer clothes, drove fancy cars, and talked about vacations in exotic places, things that Daniel could only dream of. He tried his best to fit in, to keep up with the conversations about the latest gadgets or the newest trends, but it was clear to everyone that Daniel was different. He didn't have the same background, the same privileges, and most of all, the same wealth. It didn't take long for the other students to pick up on these differences, and soon Daniel found himself the target of their ridicule. Two boys in particular, Ethan and Liam, seemed to take a special interest in making Daniel's life miserable. They were the epitome of privilege, with an air of superiority that made them feel entitled to mock and belittle those they deemed beneath them. They would make snide comments about Daniel's clothes, which were often secondhand, and laugh at the fact that he didn't have the latest phone or the coolest shoes. But what hurt Daniel the most were the jabs they made about his mother. Word had gotten around that Daniel's mother sold sweets on the streets, and Ethan and Liam latched onto this with cruel glee. They would mimic the calls of street vendors when Daniel walked by, pretending to hawk sweets in exaggerated voices. "Hey Daniel, want some candy? Or is that your mom's job?" They would jeer, their voices dripping with disdain. The words cut deep, but Daniel never showed it. He would walk away, his head held high, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing him hurt. Inside, though, Daniel was struggling. He knew his mother worked hard for him, that she sacrificed so much to give him the best education possible. He was proud of her resilience and her strength, but he also felt a deep shame that she had to endure such hardships for his sake. He hated that she had to walk the streets every day, tired and worn, just to make ends meet. And he hated even more that he couldn't do anything to help her, that he couldn't protect her from the cruelty of others. Rosa, for her part, was unaware of the full extent of what Daniel was going through at school. She knew that he was quiet and withdrawn, that he spent most of his time studying rather than socializing, but she assumed it was because he was focused on his education. She didn't know about the bullying, about the cruel words and the isolation. Daniel didn't want to burden her with his problems. He knew how hard she worked and didn't want to add to her worries. So he kept it all inside, bottling up his emotions and channeling them into his studies. He was determined to make something of himself, to rise above the taunts and the teasing, and prove that he was just as good, if not better, than those who looked down on him. But the bullying continued, and as the months passed, it began to take a toll on Daniel. He became more withdrawn, more isolated. He stopped eating lunch with the other students, choosing instead to find a quiet corner of the school where he could eat in peace. He avoided eye contact with Ethan and Liam, trying to make himself as invisible as possible. But they always found him, always had something nasty to say. It seemed like there was no escape, no respite from the relentless taunting. For Rosa, the struggles of her day-to-day life were a constant burden, but she bore them with a quiet dignity that belied the pain she often felt. Every morning she would rise before the sun, her hands already aching from the previous day's work. The small apartment she and Daniel shared was humble, but Rosa kept it spotless, taking pride in the little she had. The kitchen was her sanctuary, a place where she could lose herself in the rhythm of cooking. The act of creating something sweet and delicious from simple ingredients brought her a sense of peace, a brief respite from the worries that filled her mind. But as soon as she stepped out of the door, the reality of her situation would hit her once more. The streets of Atlanta were busy and unforgiving, filled with people who were too caught up in their own lives to notice the woman selling sweets on the corner. Some days, Rosa would stand for hours without making a single sale, the basket of sweets growing heavier with each passing minute. And then there were the customers who did stop, some out of genuine kindness, but others out of a sense of pity or, worse, disdain. Rosa had grown used to the way some people looked at her, with a mixture of contempt and condescension. She had learned to brush off the insults, to let the cruel comments slide off her like water off a duck's back. But it wasn't always easy. There were days when the weight of it all, the long hours, the lack of money, the loneliness, became almost too much to bear. On those days, Rosa would think of Daniel, of his bright future and the dreams she had for him, and it would give her the strength to keep going. Despite everything, Rosa never let Daniel see how much she was struggling. When he came home from school, she would greet him with a smile and a warm meal, asking him about his day and listening intently as he talked about his studies. Daniel was the one thing in her life that brought her true joy, and she lived for the moments when they could be together, just the two of them, sharing a simple meal and talking about their hopes for the future. But there was a growing tension between them, one that neither of them could quite put into words. Rosa sensed that something was bothering Daniel, that there was a sadness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. But whenever she asked him about it, he would brush it off, saying he was just tired from studying, and so Rosa didn't push. She told herself that Daniel was just under a lot of pressure with school and that he would open up to her when he was ready. The truth, however, was that Daniel was struggling more than he let on. The constant bullying, the sense of not belonging, was eating away at him, and he didn't know how to cope. He wanted to make his mother proud, to show her that all her sacrifices had been worth it, but the weight of his own insecurities was becoming too much to bear. He was ashamed of the way they lived, of the fact that his mother had to work so hard just to keep a roof over their heads. He hated that he couldn't give her the life she deserved, and he hated even more that he felt ashamed of her. It all came to a head on the day of his graduation. It was supposed to be a day of celebration, a day when all of Rosa's hard work and Daniel's perseverance would finally pay off. But as Rosa walked up to the school dressed in the same clothes she had worn to work, her hair still damp with sweat, she felt a sense of dread. She had wanted to look nice for Daniel's big day, to show him how proud she was, but there had been no time. She had barely made enough money to cover the bus fare, let alone buy a new outfit. And so, she walked into the school, hoping that Daniel wouldn't be embarrassed by her appearance. Daniel saw her as soon as she entered the hall, her small frame dwarfed by the grandeur of the building. She looked out of place among the well-dressed parents and the affluent families. But to Daniel, she was the most beautiful person in the room. He was about to go over to her when he heard the familiar voices of Ethan and Liam behind him. "Look who decided to show up," Ethan sneered, his eyes fixed on Rosa. "Guess she couldn't afford a new dress for the occasion." Liam snickered. "Maybe she's saving up to buy some real clothes. You know, something that doesn't smell like sweat and sugar." Daniel's fists clenched at his sides, but he forced himself to stay calm. He had been waiting for this day for years, and he wasn't going to let them ruin it. But as he watched his mother walk up the aisle, her head held high despite the whispers and the stares, something inside him snapped. He could feel the anger rising in his chest, the years of pent-up frustration and humiliation bubbling to the surface. As he stepped up to the podium to give his graduation speech, he knew he couldn't hold it in any longer. The words he had prepared, the ones about hard work and perseverance, seemed meaningless now. Instead, he spoke from the heart, his voice shaking with emotion as he addressed the crowd. "I want to talk about someone who means more to me than anyone else in this world," he began, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on Rosa. "My mother." The room fell silent, the mocking laughter dying in the throats of Ethan and Liam. Daniel continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. He spoke of his mother's sacrifices, of the long hours she worked to put him through school, of the love and support she had given him every step of the way. He talked about the bullying, the way Ethan and Liam had made his life a living hell, and how he had endured it all for her, for the woman who had given him everything. "And to those who think they're better than us because they have money or nice clothes or fancy cars, let me tell you something," Daniel said, his voice ringing out clear and strong. "You'll never know the kind of strength it takes to do what my mother does every single day. You'll never understand the kind of love she has for me, or the sacrifices she's made. So go ahead, laugh at us if you want. But I'll tell you this, I'm proud of my mother. I'm proud of who she is and what she's done for me, and nothing you say or do will ever change that." The room erupted into applause, the sound echoing off the walls as people stood up, clapping and cheering for Daniel and his mother. Ethan and Liam shrank back, their faces pale as they realized the impact of Daniel's words. Rosa, meanwhile, stood in stunned silence, tears streaming down her face as she listened to her son speak. For the first time, she realized just how much Daniel had been carrying, how much he had been holding inside. And in that moment, she felt a surge of pride so strong it took her breath away. This was her son, the boy she had raised on her own, the boy who had faced so many challenges and come out stronger because of them. And as she watched him walk down the aisle, his head held high, she knew that no matter what happened next, they would face it together as they always had. Daniel stood at the podium, the applause still ringing in his ears as he took a deep breath. The emotions that had fueled his speech were still swirling inside him, a mixture of relief, pride, and a touch of fear. He hadn't planned to expose Ethan and Liam like that, hadn't intended to lay bare the pain he'd endured for so long. But as he spoke, it felt like the right thing to do, the only thing he could do. The years of humiliation and silence had built up inside him, and this was his moment to finally speak his truth. As the applause began to die down, Daniel glanced out at the sea of faces before him. His classmates, their parents, and the faculty all looked up at him with expressions ranging from admiration to shock. He could see the pride in his mother's tear-filled eyes, and it gave him the strength to continue. But now, instead of speaking to the whole room, he focused on one person, his mother, Rosa. "Mom," Daniel said, his voice softening as he looked directly at her. "Everything I am, everything I've accomplished is because of you. You've given me more than I could ever repay, and I want everyone here to know that I owe all of this to you. You are the strongest person I know, and I'm so proud to be your son." Rosa, who had been trying to hold back her tears, finally let them fall freely. The room was quiet now, everyone watching as this emotional exchange unfolded. Daniel's words hung in the air, a testament to the bond between mother and son, forged through years of hardship and love. Rosa wanted to stand up, to go to him, but she felt rooted to her seat, overwhelmed by the weight of the moment. As Daniel finished his speech, he stepped down from the podium and walked over to his mother. The entire room seemed to hold its breath as he reached her, his heart pounding in his chest. When he finally stood before her, he did something he hadn't done in years. He knelt down, right there in front of everyone, and took her hands in his. "Thank you, Mom," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "Thank you for everything." The room erupted once again, this time with cheers and applause that were even louder than before. The sound was deafening, but for Daniel and Rosa, it was as if they were the only two people in the world. Rosa pulled him into a tight embrace, holding him as if she would never let go. In that moment, all the struggles, all the pain seemed to melt away, leaving only the love they shared. As they stood together, surrounded by the applause of the crowd, Rosa realized that this was more than just a graduation. It was a vindication of everything they had endured, a public acknowledgement of the sacrifices she had made and the strength they had both shown. She felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that her son had not only succeeded, but had done so with integrity and courage. But the story didn't end there. The events of that day set off a chain reaction that no one could have anticipated. As the news of Daniel's speech spread, it reached beyond the walls of the school, making its way into the broader community. People began talking about the speech, about the courage it took for a young man to stand up and speak out against the injustices he had faced. It wasn't long before the local media picked up the story, and soon, Daniel and Rosa found themselves at the center of a public conversation about bullying, resilience, and the power of a mother's love. The school, too, was forced to reckon with the fallout from Daniel's speech. The administration, which had prided itself on maintaining a prestigious and exclusive environment, was suddenly under scrutiny. Parents and faculty members began to question the culture that had allowed such blatant bullying to go unchecked. The headmaster called an emergency meeting with the staff, and it was clear that something needed to be done. For Ethan and Liam, the consequences were immediate and severe. The two boys, who had always seemed untouchable, suddenly found themselves facing a very different reality. Their parents, who had been blissfully unaware of their son's behavior, were furious when they learned the full extent of what had happened. The families of Ethan and Liam were wealthy and well-connected, but even they couldn't protect their sons from the backlash that followed. The school suspended Ethan and Liam indefinitely, pending a formal investigation. The parents of other students demanded accountability, not just for the bullies, but for the school's apparent failure to address the issue of bullying. There was talk of lawsuits, and the pressure on the school to act swiftly and decisively was immense. But the situation escalated further when Rosa and Daniel were approached by a lawyer who offered to take their case pro bono. The lawyer, a well-known advocate for victims of bullying, believed that Daniel's case could set a precedent and bring about real change. After discussing it with Daniel, Rosa agreed to move forward with the legal action. She had always taught her son to stand up for what was right, and now she felt it was their duty to ensure that no other child would have to endure what Daniel had gone through. The case quickly gained media attention, and soon it was the talk of the town. Ethan and Liam, once the golden boys of their school, were now at the center of a legal battle that threatened to destroy their families' reputations. The trial was scheduled to take place over the summer, and as the date approached, the tension grew. The courtroom was packed on the first day of the trial, with reporters, community members, and supporters of both sides filling the benches. Rosa and Daniel sat side by side, their hands clasped together as they prepared to face the ordeal ahead. The lawyer representing them was confident, but Rosa couldn't help feeling a sense of dread. She knew that the trial would be grueling, and she worried about how it would affect Daniel. Ethan and Liam sat at the defense table with their parents, their faces pale and drawn. Gone were the cocky grins and the air of superiority. They looked like scared boys, and for the first time, they realized the gravity of what they had done. The trial was a wake-up call for them, one that would change their lives forever. The prosecution presented a compelling case, laying out the details of the bullying that Daniel had endured. They called witnesses who testified to the repeated harassment, and they played recordings of some of the cruel comments that had been made. The evidence was damning, and it painted a picture of a systematic campaign of bullying that had gone unchecked for far too long. The defense tried to argue that Ethan and Liam were just kids, that they hadn't understood the impact of their actions. They claimed that the boys had been influenced by their peers and that they regretted what they had done. But the judge, a stern woman with little patience for excuses, wasn't swayed. She listened carefully to both sides, but it was clear that she had little sympathy for the defendants. When it came time for Daniel to testify, the courtroom was silent. He spoke calmly and clearly, recounting the years of torment he had endured at the hands of Ethan and Liam. He talked about the shame he had felt, the isolation, and the impact it had had on his self-esteem. But he also spoke about his mother, about the strength she had given him, and the love that had sustained him through it all. The judge listened intently, and when Daniel finished, she nodded thoughtfully. It was clear that his testimony had made an impression. The trial lasted for several days, with each side presenting their arguments and calling witnesses, but in the end it was Daniel's words that carried the most weight. When the time came for the judge to deliver her verdict, the tension in the courtroom was palpable. She began by acknowledging the seriousness of the case and the impact that bullying can have on a young person's life. She spoke about the responsibility that adults, particularly those in positions of authority, have to protect children from harm. Then she turned to Ethan and Liam. She told them that while she believed they were genuinely remorseful, their actions had caused real and lasting harm. She sentenced them to a term in a juvenile detention center, where they would be required to participate in counseling and rehabilitation programs. In addition, she ordered them to pay restitution to Rosa and Daniel for the emotional distress they had caused. The sentence was a blow to Ethan and Liam, but it was also a chance for them to reflect on their actions and make amends. As they were led out of the courtroom, their faces were pale, and their parents looked on with a mixture of anger and sadness. The trial was over, but the consequences of their actions would stay with them for a long time. In the weeks that followed, life began to return to some semblance of normalcy for Rosa and Daniel. The media attention gradually faded, and they were able to focus on the future. But the trial had left its mark on both of them, and they knew that they would never forget what they had been through. Ethan and Liam, meanwhile, found themselves in a very different world. Juvenile detention was a harsh wake-up call, and the boys quickly realized that they were no longer in control. The environment was tough, and they had to learn to navigate it without the safety net of their parents' wealth and privilege. The counseling sessions they attended forced them to confront the reality of what they had done, and for the first time, they began to understand the impact of their actions. As the months passed, Ethan and Liam slowly began to change. The arrogance and entitlement that had once defined them were replaced by a sense of humility and regret. They realized that they had been wrong, that they had hurt people in ways they hadn't fully understood. They began to see the world through different eyes, and they started to make efforts to better themselves. When their time in detention was finally over, Ethan and Liam were released back into the world, but they were not the same boys who had walked into that courtroom. They were quieter, more reflective, and determined to make amends for their past mistakes. They knew that it wouldn't be easy, that they would have to work hard to earn back the trust and respect they had lost. One of the first things they did after their release was to seek out Rosa and Daniel. They knew that they needed to apologize, to show that they were truly sorry for what they had done. It wasn't just about saying the words, it was about taking responsibility and demonstrating that they had changed. Rosa was surprised when Ethan and Liam showed up at her door one afternoon, their heads bowed and their faces filled with remorse. She hadn't expected to see them again, and she wasn't sure how to feel. But as they stood there, nervously shifting from foot to foot, she could see that they were sincere. "Mrs. Martinez," Ethan began, his voice trembling slightly, "we're here because we want to apologize for everything we did. We know that we hurt you and Daniel, and we're really sorry. We've had a lot of time to think about what we did, and we realize how wrong we were. We don't expect you to forgive us, but we wanted to tell you in person that we're sorry." Liam nodded in agreement, his eyes downcast. "We know that words aren't enough, but we want you to know that we're trying to change. We're going to do better, and we're going to make sure that what we did never happens again." Rosa looked at the two boys standing before her, and she felt a mixture of emotions. Part of her wanted to hold on to the anger and the pain they had caused, but another part of her recognized the courage it took for them to come here, to admit their wrongs and ask for forgiveness. She knew that holding on to anger wouldn't help anyone, least of all her and Daniel. "Thank you for coming here," Rosa said softly, her voice tinged with emotion. "It takes a lot of courage to admit when you're wrong, and I can see that you're sincere. I want you to know that I forgive you. We all make mistakes, and what's important is that you learn from them and grow." Ethan and Liam looked up, their eyes wide with surprise. They hadn't expected forgiveness, not after everything they had done. But hearing Rosa's words, they felt a weight lift off their shoulders, a sense of relief that they hadn't felt in a long time. "Thank you, Mrs. Martinez," Liam said, his voice thick with emotion. "We'll do our best to make things right, to be better people." Rosa nodded, and after a moment of silence, she invited them inside. They spent the next hour talking, with Rosa sharing stories about her life and the lessons she had learned along the way. She told them about the importance of kindness, of understanding that everyone has their own struggles, and of the power of forgiveness. Daniel came home later and found them all sitting in the living room. At first, he was shocked to see Ethan and Liam there, but when Rosa explained what had happened, he felt a sense of closure. He realized that holding on to anger would only keep him trapped in the past, and like his mother, he chose to forgive. In the weeks and months that followed, Ethan and Liam continued to work on themselves. They volunteered at community centers, spoke out against bullying, and made efforts to rebuild the trust they had broken. It was a long and difficult journey, but they were committed to making amends. For Daniel, life slowly returned to normal. He started college, pursuing his dreams with the same determination that had gotten him through high school. He and Rosa continued to live their lives with the same quiet strength that had always defined them, but now there was a sense of peace, a feeling that they had come through the storm and emerged stronger for it. The experience had changed them all in different ways, but it had also brought them together. Rosa and Daniel, Ethan and Liam, all of them had learned valuable lessons about resilience, forgiveness, and the importance of standing up for what is right. They had faced challenges that could have broken them, but instead, they had grown, becoming better, stronger, and more compassionate. As time passed, the story of Daniel's speech and the trial became something of a legend in their community, a reminder of the power of words and the strength of the human spirit. People would talk about it, about how a young man had stood up against injustice and how it had changed not just his life, but the lives of those around him. And in the end, that was what mattered most, that they had all learned, grown, and come out the other side with a deeper understanding of themselves and each other. It was a story of redemption, of the power of love and forgiveness, and of the strength that comes from facing your challenges head-on and refusing to let them define you. As the months rolled on, life began to take on a new rhythm for Rosa and Daniel. The chaos of the trial had subsided, leaving behind a quieter, more reflective time in their lives. The media attention had faded, and the spotlight that had once shone so brightly on their struggles had dimmed, allowing them to return to the simplicity of their daily routine. But even in this return to normalcy, everything felt different, infused with the hard-earned wisdom they had gained from their experiences. For Daniel, college was a new beginning, a chance to immerse himself in his studies and explore the possibilities that lay before him. He had chosen to major in psychology, a decision that surprised some but made perfect sense to him. After everything he'd been through, he was drawn to understanding the human mind, to learning about the complexities of emotions, motivations, and behavior. He wanted to help others, to be the kind of person who could offer support and guidance to those who needed it most. College was a world away from the elite private school he had attended, and Daniel relished the diversity and openness he found on campus. Here, no one cared about where you came from or what your parents did for a living. It was a place where ideas were valued over appearances, where students from all walks of life came together to learn and grow. Daniel made friends who shared his passion for psychology, and he found himself thriving in this new environment. The pain of the past didn't disappear overnight, but it became a part of him, something he carried with him but no longer allowed to define him. He began to speak more openly about his experiences, sharing his story with others who had faced similar challenges. He joined support groups on campus where he listened to the stories of others and offered his own insights. Each time he spoke, he felt a little lighter, as if by sharing his pain, he was slowly letting it go. Rosa, too, found herself adjusting to this new chapter in their lives. With Daniel away at college, the apartment felt quieter, and she often found herself missing the sound of his voice or the sight of him studying at the kitchen table. But she knew this was what they had worked for, what she had sacrificed so much to achieve. Daniel was living his dream, and that was all she had ever wanted. Rosa continued to make her sweets, though now she sold them in a small shop that she had opened with the money from the court settlement. It was a modest place, tucked away on a side street, but it was hers. The shop became a gathering place for the community, where people would come not just to buy sweets but to chat, to share their stories, and to find comfort in the familiar warmth of Rosa's presence. She loved the shop, loved the sense of purpose it gave her, and she took pride in the fact that she had built it with her own two hands. But more than anything, Rosa found peace in the knowledge that she and Daniel had come through the worst of it and had emerged stronger. The trial, the bullying, the years of hardship, they were all behind them now, and they had their whole lives ahead of them. She no longer felt the same weight of worry that had once consumed her, and for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to dream about the future. As Daniel settled into college life and Rosa into her new role as a business owner, they began to spend more time apart. But their bond remained as strong as ever. Daniel would visit Rosa on weekends, bringing stories of his classes and his new friends, and Rosa would share the latest news from the shop. They laughed more now, finding joy in the little things that they had once taken for granted. The shop became a symbol of their resilience, a testament to the fact that they had survived and thrived despite everything. It was a place where the past met the present, where Rosa's memories of struggle intertwined with the hope of a brighter future. And it was here, in this small, cozy space, that Rosa found her purpose. But life, as it often does, had more surprises in store for them. One afternoon, while Rosa was busy in the shop, she received a visit from an unexpected guest. It was Ethan, looking older and more mature than she remembered. He stood in the doorway, hesitant, as if unsure whether he was welcome. "Mrs. Martinez," he began, his voice soft, "I hope I'm not intruding. I just wanted to stop by and see how you're doing." Rosa smiled warmly, gesturing for him to come in. "Of course not, Ethan. It's good to see you. How have you been?" Ethan stepped inside, glancing around the shop with a look of admiration. "I've been doing well, thanks. I've been busy with school and, well, trying to make up for the past. I just wanted to thank you again for forgiving me and to see if there's anything I can do to help." Rosa appreciated the sincerity in his voice, the way he carried himself with a humility that had been absent in his younger years. She knew that he had worked hard to turn his life around, and she was glad to see the progress he had made. "Thank you, Ethan," she said. "But you've already done enough by choosing to change. That's all I ever wanted, for you to learn from what happened and become a better person. But if you ever want to talk, or just need a place to come and relax, you're always welcome here." Ethan smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "That means a lot to me, Mrs. Martinez. I'll definitely take you up on that." They chatted for a while longer, with Ethan sharing stories of his own journey to redemption. He had started volunteering at a local youth center, helping kids who were struggling with the same issues he had faced. It was his way of giving back, of making sure that others didn't go down the same path he had. As he left the shop, Rosa felt a deep sense of satisfaction. It was a reminder that people could change, that even those who had caused pain could find a way to make amends. It reinforced her belief in forgiveness and the power of second chances. Daniel, too, continued to grow and evolve. He excelled in his studies, earning top marks and gaining the respect of his professors and peers. But more than that, he found his calling. The more he learned about psychology, the more he realized that he wanted to specialize in counseling, particularly for young people who had experienced trauma or bullying. His experiences had given him a unique perspective, one that allowed him to connect with others in a way that few could. He began working part-time at a counseling center near campus, where he met with students who were dealing with their own struggles. It was challenging work, but Daniel found it deeply fulfilling. Each time he helped someone open up, each time he saw the light return to their eyes, he knew he was on the right path. One day, Daniel was asked to speak at a conference on youth mental health. It was a daunting prospect, standing in front of a room full of professionals, sharing his story and insights. But Daniel knew it was an opportunity he couldn't pass up. He wanted to use his voice not just to help those he met one-on-one, but to inspire others on a larger scale. The conference was held in a large auditorium filled with psychologists, counselors, and educators from across the country. As Daniel took the stage, he felt a familiar mix of nerves and determination. He began by telling his story, the same story he had shared at his high school graduation, but this time with the added perspective of everything that had happened since then. He spoke about the impact of bullying, the importance of resilience, and the power of forgiveness. But he also talked about the need for systemic change, about the responsibility of schools, parents, and communities to create environments where every child feels safe and valued. He challenged the audience to think about how they could make a difference, how they could use their skills and resources to support those who needed it most. By the time he finished, the room was silent. Daniel's words had struck a chord with everyone in attendance. When the applause finally came, it was overwhelming, a standing ovation that lasted for what felt like minutes. Daniel was humbled by the response, but he knew that this was just the beginning. There was so much more work to be done, so many more lives to touch. In the months that followed, Daniel's reputation as a passionate advocate for youth mental health grew. He was invited to speak at other conferences, to write articles for professional journals, and even to consult on policy initiatives aimed at reducing bullying in schools. His career was taking off in ways he had never imagined, but through it all, he remained grounded in the lessons he had learned from his mother. Rosa watched with pride as her son flourished. She knew that he was making a difference, that his work was changing lives. And though she missed him on the days when he was busy with his growing responsibilities, she knew that they were always connected, bound by the shared experiences that had shaped them both. But life wasn't just about work. As Daniel continued to build his career, he also made time for the people who mattered most. He visited Rosa often, spending weekends at the shop, helping her with the business and just enjoying her company. They would talk for hours, reminiscing about the past, laughing about the small things, and planning for the future. One afternoon, as they sat together in the shop, Rosa brought up something that had been on her mind for a while. "Daniel," she said, her tone thoughtful, "I've been thinking. You've done so much, accomplished so much, and I'm so proud of you. But there's one more thing I want to see you do." Daniel looked at her curiously. "What's that, Mom?" Rosa smiled, a twinkle in her eye. "I want to see you happy, truly happy. You've spent so much time helping others, and I know how much it means to you, but I also want to make sure you're taking care of yourself. Maybe it's time you started thinking about your own life, your own future." Daniel chuckled softly. "You mean like settling down? Finding someone special?" Rosa nodded, her smile widening. "Yes, exactly. You deserve to have someone who loves you, someone who shares your dreams and supports you. You've given so much to others, Daniel. It's time you let someone give to you." Daniel knew his mother was right. He had been so focused on his career, on making a difference, that he hadn't given much thought to his personal life. But now, with Rosa's gentle encouragement, he began to think about what he wanted for his future, not just in terms of his work, but in terms of love and happiness. As the years went by, Daniel did indeed find someone special. Her name was Sophia, a fellow counselor who shared his passion for helping others. They met at a conference, and it wasn't long before they realized how much they had in common. Sophia was kind, compassionate, and strong, everything Daniel admired. Their relationship grew quickly, built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared values. Rosa was thrilled when Daniel introduced her to Sophia. The two women hit it off immediately, bonding over their shared love for Daniel and their commitment to helping others. It wasn't long before Daniel and Sophia were talking about their future together, about the possibility of marriage and starting a family. When Daniel finally proposed, it was in the shop, surrounded by the warmth and love that had defined his relationship with his mother. Rosa was there to witness it, her heart swelling with joy as she saw her son take this next step in his life. The wedding was a small, intimate affair, held in the same shop that had been the backdrop for so many important moments in their lives. Friends and family gathered to celebrate, filling the space with laughter and love. As Daniel and Sophia exchanged their vows, Rosa felt a deep sense of contentment. She had watched her son grow from a boy into a man, had seen him overcome challenges that would have broken others, and now she was seeing him start a new chapter in his life, filled with love and hope. After the wedding, life continued to move forward, but it was richer, fuller, with the addition of Sophia to their family. Daniel and Sophia settled into married life, continuing their work as counselors while also making time for each other and for Rosa. They often visited the shop, where they would sit with Rosa, sipping coffee and talking about their dreams for the future. As the years passed, Daniel and Sophia welcomed their first child, a beautiful baby girl they named Isabella. Rosa was overjoyed to become a grandmother, and she doted on Isabella, spoiling her with sweets from the shop and stories from her own childhood. Isabella grew up surrounded by love, with her parents and grandmother teaching her the values of kindness, resilience, and the importance of family. The shop, which had once been a place of refuge and healing for Rosa, became a gathering place for their growing family. It was where birthdays were celebrated, where holidays were spent, and where memories were made. The walls of the shop, lined with jars of colorful sweets, bore witness to the love and joy that filled their lives. But even as they built this new life together, they never forgot the lessons of the past. Rosa continued to teach Isabella about the importance of forgiveness, about how people can change and grow if given the chance. Daniel and Sophia, in their work as counselors, helped countless young people find their way, using their own experiences to guide and support those who were struggling. And as Isabella grew older, she too began to understand the significance of the shop, of the stories her parents and grandmother told her. She learned about the trials they had faced, about the strength it took to overcome them, and about the love that had sustained them through it all. Isabella knew that she was part of something special, a legacy of resilience and hope that had been passed down through the generations. Rosa, now in her later years, watched with pride as her family flourished. She had lived a life filled with challenges, but also with incredible joy and fulfillment. She had raised a son who had become a beacon of hope for others, had found love and happiness, and had built a family that would carry on the values she held dear. In the quiet moments when the shop was closed and the lights were dimmed, Rosa would sit and reflect on the journey that had brought her to this point. She thought of Marco, the love of her life, and how proud he would be of their son. She thought of the struggles they had faced, the hardships they had endured, and how they had emerged stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. And in those moments, Rosa felt a deep sense of peace. She knew that she had lived her life with integrity, had faced her challenges head-on, and had built something beautiful out of the pain and hardship. Her life had been a testament to the power of love, resilience, and forgiveness, and she knew that this legacy would continue long after she was gone. As the years went on, the shop became a cherished landmark in their community, a place where people came not just for sweets, but for comfort, for a listening ear, and for a reminder that no matter how difficult life may seem, there is always hope. Rosa's story and the story of her family became part of the fabric of the community, a source of inspiration for all who heard it. And so, life continued with its ups and downs, its joys and sorrows, but always with the knowledge that they had each other, that they were part of something greater than themselves. The lessons of the past, the love they shared, and the values they held dear would be passed down to future generations, ensuring that the legacy of Rosa, Daniel, and their family would live on. As the sun set on another day, Rosa sat in the shop, her heart full of gratitude. She had lived a life she was proud of, had raised a son who had made a difference in the world, and had found peace in the knowledge that she had done her best. She knew that when her time came, she would leave this world knowing that she had left it a better place, that her love and resilience had touched the lives of many, and that her legacy would endure. The shop, with its warm, welcoming atmosphere, would continue to be a place of refuge, of healing, and of love. And in the hearts of those who knew Rosa, Daniel, and their family, their story would live on. A reminder that no matter what life throws at you, with love, resilience, and forgiveness, anything is possible.